Hey guys, this is Nia. Today I'm going to attempt to show you how I make floral watercolor bookmarks. My first video did pretty well and I had comments asking me to do more of these or to do it without the video being a full speed paint. First off, here are the supplies that I used. Here I'm using Reeves brand liquid watercolors, which are very affordable and good for beginners. I also have a paper towel or tissue handy, a palette, and clean water. Here I'm using a pointed brush in the brand ArtMedia, and it's a size 2. First off, I'm just going to show you how to paint the flowers on my sketchbook first, because it's always a good idea to practice and get used to the hang of the paint and the feel of the painting before you make the final product. Now I'm going to wet my brush slightly and I'm mixing here crimson and flesh tint to create a peachy color. You can choose whichever color you want, but basically you want to put a decent amount of paint. You don't want something too watery and runny. Then I'm going to create strokes like this to show the size of the flower. This is just the basic shape that I want, but once you get the hang of it, you can design your own. Now I'm going to clean and wet my brush again, and what you want to do is pull the paint with the clean water from your brush to create a soft transition. Keep doing the fine strokes to create something like a ruffled look, and basically you're suggesting the shapes of the petals. This watercolor technique is called pulling because the basic idea is you pull all the pigments with the clean water that you have until you find the shape that you like. Here, as you can see, I'm adding paint to the still wet surface to create more contrast in the vibrancy of the color. And the idea behind this is when the surface is more wet, your paint is going to spread out more evenly, and the drier the surface, the more defined your brush strokes will be. I'm not too sure what kind of flower this is, maybe it's a carnation, but I'm just going to generalize and call this a flower. Anyway, after you're done with the first one, all you do is clean your brush and repeat the same method. Pick up a decent amount of paint and create strokes in the shape and the angle of the flower that you want. After you're sort of happy with the shape, clean and wet your brush and begin to pull the water from the strokes that you created earlier. Even if you keep making the same angles, each flower is going to look different, so it's a good chance to practice and design the shapes and the formation that you want. I'm going to show you one more time, and this time I'm going to make the flower a lighter tonal value. In these types of paintings, the difference in vibrancy and the tonal value of your subject may suggest depth. The lighter and the less detail you have, the further away it looks, and vice versa. So keep playing around with it, but basically it's still the same method of pulling. So the same thing, create the strokes, and as you can see here, I'm using a runnier consistency than the previous flowers. So when I pull with the clean water, the flower is going to turn even lighter than the strokes. Next, I'm going to create the stems and some flower buds. I'm mixing moss green, yellow, and a bit of red, which is the opposite or the complementary color of green, to mute the color a little bit so it looks more natural. If you're not used to mixing your colors yet, you can just use moss green. For the stem, I'm making a triangle shape at the bottom of the flower, And from the tip of the triangle, I continue to pull the thin stroke for the stem. I suggest to not make the stem too straight, instead try to make the line flowy and organic with no harsh edges. The brush plays quite a huge role when it comes to the thinness of the line, so make sure you use a pointed brush. You might need a bit of practice if you're new to watercolors because it takes a decent amount of control to create the fine lines. Depending on the type of flower though, it's up to you whether you want the stem to be very thin or something a bit chunky. It's all just out of preference. Now I'm painting oval shapes, transitioning smoothly to the stem with the same green to create the flower buds. When you have different stages in growth of the flower, your painting will look more lively and natural, so try to incorporate different stages. Like here, I'm going to take the previous color from the flower and paint on top of the buds to show a little bit of the flower peeking out. Always clean your brush when you're going to paint a different color because you don't want the next color to look murky. With the leaves, you can use different brushes like I'm going to show you later, but here I'll show you with the same brush that I've been using. Just make sure your brush isn't too dry so you can mix the colors well when you fill the shape of the leaf. So here I'm going to swap my brush. I've recently found an old brush that I got given probably 10 years ago. This is a Chinese calligraphy brush, or a Japanese according to the name. It's called a sumi brush. The quality isn't great because as I've been experimenting with it, a lot of the bristles pull off, but I like how it comes to a very fine tip and it holds a lot of water at the back. The hair holds its shape and is very good for sharp edges and fine details. I'll leave a link down below if you're interested in purchasing it. As you can see, as the back of the brush is very thick, you can paint from the pressure of the brush and it comes to a very fine tip. Next, we're going to cut the paper for the bookmarks. I'm using the usual paper that I use, which is the 300 GSM Canson XL4 watercolor. This is actually scrap paper, but I don't really want to waste any, and a good way of using scraps is to use it for a small project like this. Now, in the previous video, I had a bigger piece of paper, so I taped it all together, but you don't really need to unless you're painting a landscape on the bookmark and you want a clean border around the background painting. If not, you can paint straight on the paper that you've already cut. My measurements are around 5.5 by 15 centimeters, but you can make yours any shape and form that you want. I'm just going to speed through the rest of this because this step is quite straightforward. So I got 2 pieces out of my scraps and now I'm going to paint on it using the same pulling method. As you will see when the video progresses, all the flowers turn out really different even though I'm using the same exact method. And I'm painting the same angle of the flower. I don't really plan much on the composition for this and I just tend to use the space that I have. Watercolor is so versatile and not every flower has to be perfectly shaped. What you want to do is just to suggest a form of the flower shape. Having stems and leaves helps our eyes adjust and process that it is in fact a shape of a flower. So you don't have to worry too much when you're just starting out. You basically design the bookmarks yourself. You can put more flowers or more leaves or more of the buds. Or you can just choose to make one simple flower. You can also play with the depth and the growth stages of the flower to create interest and variety in your subject, and choose any color that you want. Just have fun and experiment. I'm going to speed through again because you guys now know the steps and methods, so I'll leave you guys to it and I'll meet you at the end of the video. So for the second bookmark, I'm making a blue flower. The flower is a mixture of phthalo blue and violet, and for the stems I used moss green, phthalo blue, and a little bit of crimson. This is just an example of how you can mix your own colors and personalize your own bookmarks according to your taste. Here are the finished bookmarks. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you learned something new. Please leave a comment if you have any questions for me. If you want to see more videos by me, you can click subscribe and the bell icon so you can get notifications whenever I post something new. Bye!